Good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you're at, ladies and gents. I am Kura Isagami, and welcome back to class with another episode of my Robattle Studies 101 course. Now, this episode in particular has been highly requested and had a lot of questions asked about to me for quite some time now, and I actually did want to have it out sooner, but some outside circumstances did make recording it just a little bit dicey here and there, but thankfully I got all that taken care of and put to the side. With this episode, however, I am going to be addressing a lot of questions, mostly with just a basic breakdown and tutorial on how metals behave, but some of the questions that have been asked to me are things like, which metal should I use, how should I use it, how should I raise it, how do I get the material needed to raise it, and what materials are even required to raise a metal, among other questions. So with this, let's go ahead and do a quick breakdown and in-depth guide into metals, the heart and soul of the Medarot. Now, anyone who's watched the anime or played any of the early games knows pretty much that without a metal, that is exactly what makes a Medarot tick. So without one, it basically will serve as nothing more than a metal 3D puzzle on the floor with nothing more to it. But with that, metals also have a lot of different behaviors and personalities that can kind of determine how they fight in battle and what kinds of masteries they have while on the field. Metals can have a combination of 3 different skills that they can have mastery and proficiency in. Those 6 skills are shooting, melee, support, healing, defense, and setup. The last of which is the 7th skill, is called special. Now, special skills are something that every metal can have a mastery in, since it is not designated to any particular metal or type of metal, and as such you can consider it a wild card in many cases. Some skills that are considered special may include full charge and plant up, which is something that anyone can use without any need to have it raised or have proficiency in it. Metals can also have a combination of 3 different leg types it has proficiency in. Those leg types are biped, multi, wheeled, tank, float, flight, and sea legs. I have done a 101 and breakdown on leg types and terrains as well, so if you do have any questions or feedback necessary on that one, do feel free to consult that particular 101. And then last but not least, metals can also have a nature, which is denoted by the colored crystal somewhere near the center of the metal, which simply denotes its passive bonuses, its personality, and just how overall it behaves on the field, which can even take a lot of metals with similar proficiencies and help spread them apart to make them more unique across each other. I did also make a 101 on metal natures as well, so do feel free to consult that one as well if you have any questions or feedback or need a quick refresher on how metal natures behave and how to use them efficiently with certain builds. Now, when you go on the metal screen on determining if you're going to select one or raise it, you will find 3 small blue buttons just underneath the general breakdown and stats of the metal in question. As here, I'm just using the Ranger metal for lack of not unraised metals in this case, but the 3 blue buttons here, just to go over them briefly, are Ascend Metal, Skill Recycle, and Raise Skill Levels. And anytime you go to select a metal, you will have all 3 of these buttons, or a combination thereof, available to you. If you need to look at a metal's skill spread, or even redistribute skills by reducing one and raising another. The first of which on the docket, however, is Ascending Metals, which is the most common that you'll be seeing when you fully cap a metal at its current level cap. Typically, at base, a metal will always start at a level cap of 50. And simply how that behaves is that you have up to 50, you have a maximum of 50 skill levels that you can spread, load, and divide however you please on the metal to help improve its efficiency and use with certain skills on the field. In order to ascend a metal, however, to a higher rank, which will give it basically another 10 levels to raise, you must first also cap the metal at its highest cap, and having farmed any of the medallium material from any of the skill chip dungeons. An icon of what that particular item looks like, the medallium, is also present on this page here as you see. Metaforces 2 and 3, you may notice, also get unlocked upon certain thresholds being met. In many cases, for metals, however, Metaforce 1, which is simply a team buff, which can involve anything from a radar sight buff to across the team, to a mobile buff, to shoot boost, or even a team-wide super heal can be made use of with this Metaforce 1. This also is available always right from start, so no matter what level the medal is, you will always have this one by default to make use of, no matter what level it is or how early in gameplay that you are at. Metaforce 2, on the other hand, is unlocked once you cap the medal at level 50, which is its first default level cap, which is very easy to make in many cases if you have the materials for it. This is considered more of your offensive Metaforce in many cases, as this can be anything from a team-wide nuke or an AoE to a single target. Some examples of this would be, for instance, Sonic Shot, which is a team-wide AoE nuke which attacks all enemies with a single shooting attack. Needle Shot, which is a free headshot with a shooting attack, or non-evasive, which is an ailment-based, and so on and so on and so forth. Metaforce 3 you unlock when you ascend the medal and cap it at level 100, which also is relatively easy to obtain if you have the materials and the funds in question, and this is simply another buff, essentially, but what it allows you to do is add an ailment to all allies' attacks, more or less for the duration of the remainder of the battle. This can involve things such as adding a melt or fire effect to basic attacks, to adding bind or hold, or even thunder or freeze in some cases, depending on the medal in question. So, probably may not be as useful as, say, an enemy-wide nuke or a single-target nuke in many cases, as more often than not, you may resort to that one faster than, say, a team buff or an ailment add, but all three of them can be used in some form or fashion, especially depending on the team in question and how you're choosing to use it. Now, one of the biggest questions I get asked a lot when it comes to raising medals is, how do I spread load the skills? Because when you fully cap a medal at level 150, that gives you 150 medal skill levels to spread across 3 different skills on the medal. So naturally, that does beg the question, what skills do I use, or how do I spread load those levels? Because naturally, spreading across all 3 is not going to be the most efficient, but regardless of however you choose to do that. The most common methods that I've seen and the most efficient for raising medals is one of 2 methods. The first of which is what I call the 99-51 spread. Basically, this will give the medal one true mastery at highest efficiency possible, and then you'll have one further one at a minor skill, for lack of a better term, at 51 to use as more of an auxiliary in some cases. This is the most common type of spread you will see on just about any particular build. Balanced shooters, balanced nukers, supporters, healers, defenders, or anything of the like will more often than not use this spread as the most efficient way to make use of those skills. The second way is simply called the 75 split, and this is simply splitting 2 skills and dueling them at equal efficiency at level 75 each. Now, this I wouldn't necessarily say is a bad way to raise medals, but rather it's a more niche way to do it, for lack of better terms, as it's more often feasible for, say, ailment fighters or mixed fighters that make use of shooting and melee very equally, where damage is not necessarily a factor that you need to consider. In many cases, as examples, including, say, ailments such as shock, freeze, virus, bug, attacks where damage does not matter in the long run. This kind of stat spread could be used very efficiently and very easily. Last but not least, you may also notice with those 2, you will see that the last number in all 3 of them is a 0, which also ties into the last point of to not ever raise that 3rd skill. In fact, whenever you do decide to raise a medal, your first priority should be to dump downgrade chips to 0 out that 3rd skill that you're not going to use, because if anything, raising that 3rd skill is a waste of energy and a waste of materials, because you're taking levels away from a skill that could even have a minor mastery in. Say, for instance, with the 99-51 spread, it's a lot easier to do it that way and focus on 2 separate skills than it is to try to spread load across 3 and try to mix efficiency to where it has some kind of balance between the 3. Because more often than not, when you're choosing to do it that way, you are sacrificing something big like power or success or even preparation in many cases. Just to go over briefly as well what raising a level entails, when you raise a level, all it really does is increase its efficiency, as mentioned, but what that kind of breaks down to and entails is more along the lines of for lack of a better term, prep time. So this includes slight boost to your heat and cool across the board when using those skills, better damage reduction overall, but there are a couple skills in particular that when you raise them give you improved efficiency when using them. Those 4 skills in particular are shooting and melee naturally, but also defense, I'm told, and also healing can also greatly benefit from having a high level in this. Shooting and melee, honestly, are very self-explanatory in that respect. I do not need to go into detail. The higher the level, the higher your likelihood of landing the hit, and the higher base damage you deal. Defense, I'm saying, is kind of up in the air in some cases, as I'm told that having a higher defense skill on a medal does mean you have a better overall chance at damage reduction, and better overall efficiency at reducing damage when tanking hits or grazing them. But healing also is somewhat kind of an obvious one in this case, as simply the higher the healing level on the medal, the more efficient the healing, and the more you get back when you use a healing skill. There is going to be a very obvious difference across the board in a skill that is capped at, say, 51 as a minor, and a skill that's capped at 99 as at a major in many cases. So in many cases, you can honestly consider setup and support being kind of your free skills in this case. As in, it's something that you don't necessarily have to raise if you don't want it, but in the case that you do have some spare levels that you need to spread load, definitely say you could make use of that as kind of a wild card in many cases, to kind of help round out that efficiency and the skill spread. Now, the second skill on the board when you have access to choosing medals is skill recycle. Now, this is a particularly rare one, but it is also very good to make use of in the case you have this particular material in question. But let's say, for instance, that you choose to raise a medal and decide later on that I don't want to use it in this particular way and I need to redistribute skills or redistribute levels without wasting downgrade chips. Well, the skill recycle chips is exactly where you go, as basically all it does allow you to do is take a raised skill level that is either at capped or at 9 or 51, which however you choose to spread it, and basically spread load those levels to the other 2 skills on the medal in question. So if you decide, say, with a medal that has, I don't know, as an example, melee, healing, and setup as your spread, but you also have it as a healing-based medal, so we'll go 99 in healing and 51 in melee. And you decide down the road, oh, I want to reconvert this medal to melee-based. Well, a healing recycle chip, as denoted by the 6 you'll see here, is simply going to be your one-stop shopping, your one answer to it all, as you can basically redistribute 40 or so of those healing levels into melee to cap it out and redistribute it across the board. Now, I do also want to make a note to mention here, as you see, this is a very rare material in late game. In early game, you can get these relatively easily by raising medals and capping a certain number amount at fully capped, but in late game, they do not like to hand these out very often. So if you are going to redistribute, just make sure that it's something that you're going to commit to as something that you want to do and are going to make use with. Otherwise, your only other alternative is to use skill downgrade chips, which, while not necessarily expensive or hard to farm, is definitely going to be putting you out of your way and a waste of energy to something you could put elsewhere, such as, say, farming story or even something or another material in question, or even an event if there's one going on at the time. And the last but not least is skill leveling. Now, this is probably going to be one of the easiest ways and one of the easiest things you can farm at any given time in any given day when playing Medarot S, because you can farm from Medallium, which is what you use to ascend medals, and the skill upgrade chips, both at the same time with any of the dungeons listed here. They also are applied on a daily cycle, so one dungeon will open up for one day. When the day cycles to the next one, that dungeon will close, and the next one will open up. And then, of course, one day of the week, where all of them are open up to be farmed at any given time. If you have access to the Robattle Pass subscription, all of these are open permanently at any given time, and of course give you the times 2 reward bonus upon victory of completing one of the levels. As mentioned, this is probably one of the easiest things that you can farm at any given time, because you are basically killing 2 birds with one. Actually, no, you're killing 3 birds with one stone, because you're getting Medallium, which, like I said, is what you use to ascend medals to another level cap. You are getting skill upgrade chips, and you're getting skill downgrade chips. Now, while the downgrade chips may not be used very often, you can honestly use them very quickly as more of a skill redistribute if you don't have any recycle chips in question. Just as some final overall and closing thoughts on medals as a whole and this Robattle 101. Metals over parts. I do get this asked a lot to me as well, especially by new players, if you want to raise if you want to raise metals, or if you want to raise parts. And I will always tell them metals first, because if you have max efficiency with a metal, the only thing that's going to hold them back are parts, which honestly is a lot better than having high parts but low metal, where you still have fully capped out. Think of it this way. You're essentially having a master with rookie armor or a rookie with master armor. Who's going to be the more efficient in this case? Naturally, it's going to be the skilled fighter and the master who already knows how to make use of lower grade equipment, even though it's not going to be something he can fully benefit from. Then the rookie, who quite frankly has no idea what he's doing, but already has the fully capped out armor and no idea how to really use it, or even the ability to use it at all. Now, something else that's asked of me, Metaforce does not matter. If you need to, when you're deciding on a metal to choose for a build, you have to ask yourself up front, am I going to use Metaforce? If the answer is yes, then you need to take a little more time into deciding, am I going to use this particular Metaforce or this particular Metaforce with the build? If your answer is no, you can ignore Metaforce almost entirely, because at the very minimum, you're guaranteed a team buff, a nuke, and an ailment add anyway, no matter what metal you pick. So it gives you a little more freedom to decide what metal to choose and how to put your team together if you decide to take Metaforce out of the equation. Also, one other thing to make note of, pay attention to natures. There may be a number of metals that have similar metaforces, whether it be an AoE nuke or a team buff, that have different metals that determine how it fights in battle. As mentioned, if you do have more questions on this, do consult my Metal Natures 101, which kind of gives you a better breakdown on how to use certain metals and what parts are best fits for them when putting teams together. And then lastly, do consider the bot's overall role in battle. Now, as I said, the most common way to spread skills is the 99-51 spread, which gives you 1 mastery and 1 minor across the board, which can be used very efficiently in just about anywhere, really. But more often than not, you will see this on dedicated or mixed fighters or dedicated supports or healers, and you may consider even using the mixed ailment or the mixed fighter spread for the 75 split. So that you don't have to be as afraid of using only melee or only shooting, because damage is not something that an ailment or a mixed fighter is going to focus on. One popular example of this that can be used as a pure set would be, say, Windclap, who has a healing skill, a shooting skill, and a melee skill all in one. So naturally, if you want to maximize his efficiency as an auxiliary fighter more than a dedicated fighter, he could honestly benefit from the 75 split very easily, because he's using 2 skills with proficiency and 1 that really doesn't need it at all. But with all this being said, I do believe that covers everything with this crash course in 101, and I do want to officially dismiss class with closing thoughts, so thanks again for stopping by. If you'd like to know more, you can follow us below on Facebook at the Medarot News Network page and the Metabots Forever communities there. You can also join us on Discord in the link provided and in the comments below for a closer ear to the ground on anything related to Medarot, or even get up in with the action, and even help join the community that's geared more towards playing Medarot, as even despite the language barrier. That's what this channel is for, honestly, is to help kind of overcome that language barrier so even us Western folks can play the game and kind of learn alongside the JP community as well. You can also reach out to me personally on Twitter at Isagamikura, so if you have any questions, comments, or feedback, I'm more than open to anything. My DMs are always open, and depending on what kind of reception I get or any kind of questions I receive, you may or may not see another Robattle 101 on that particular subject sometime very soon. But aside from all this, thanks again for stopping by, folks. It's always happy to have you in for a visit. Until next time.